Hello everyone, Terry here with KeySmash Studios, and today is a very exciting day as we're going to start our series on the introduction into the C-sharp programming language. Now, C-sharp is a general purpose, object-oriented programming language that has a bunch of different features that make it one of the more commonly used programs today. It's actually the fourth most common programming language used in the world right now for a variety of reasons, ranging from game design all the way to data structures, even some research. There are certainly faster languages, such as its cousin C++, but the learning curve on C Sharp makes it particularly suited for colleges and high schools and pretty much anything that's doing an introductory level look into the language. Unsurprisingly, this gentle learning curve matches up with what Microsoft intended when they designed C Sharp. It has a number of different uses. So let us know in the comments below why you're particularly interested in learning C Sharp. Is it game design? Do you have something that you're trying to learn for research? Do you have a general interest in computer science? Anything like that? Let us know down below. So let's get started. First things first, we need to know how to start coding. It's not just some type of magic thing that you type into a computer and it works. You actually need a specific place to code. And what that's called is called an IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment. And that's a fancy way to say this is simply a place where we code programs. Now, in C Sharp, the IDE which we use is called Visual Studios. That's the generally accepted industry standard for C Sharp, whether you're doing game design or research or pretty much anything. Visual Studios Enterprise is the industry standard. And we're going to use something pretty similar. It's actually called Visual Studios Community. And I will include this link in the description below. But we're going to come to this website and we're going to download the community version of Visual Studio 2017. They just released 2019, but we have not switched to it yet, so we're going to do this guide on Visual Studio 2017. If you can't find Visual Studios 2017 and you can only find 19, or you prefer 19, or you have a different IDE that you want to use, those are all perfectly fine. They'll all work essentially the same for what we're trying to do today, so you don't really have to worry if the version is slightly different. We simply click this link. It'll begin the download when it loads into the next page. And once that downloads, we clicked it to open the download. And it pops up with this little window here that says it just needs to download a few files. And once you do that, it'll go through a fairly standard installation process. Here are Visual Studios almost done installing. So now we've loaded into our full installer, and I actually already have this installed on my computer. But all we need to say is that we need the .NET desktop development for C Sharp. And if you're going to follow along on our C++ series, you can select that one as well and install it. Just hit the install in the bottom left-hand corner, and there we go. The IDE will be installing. Now that we have Visual Studio installed, we can begin our actual coding. And to do that, we're going to create a new project. And to do this, all you really need to do, here, I'll cancel out of this. You hit Control-Shift-N. This opens up the new project window. And we're going to go over here to this left side where we see Visual Studio C Sharp. Now, you may not have all of the different languages that I have, or you may have more, but we're just interested in Visual Studio C Sharp. So you're just going to click on that, and then we're going to go down here to console.app.net framework, and here we're going to name this some type of thing that we're going to do for this episode. So we'll call this first program. And this is going to be our first program, and the IDE is going to create it, and it's going to have some things in here that we don't really need to worry about yet. So for our first program, we need to know a few things. We don't particularly need to worry about any of this stuff up above. It needs to be there, but we'll discuss why that needs to be there in later videos. The first thing that I'm doing here with these double slashes, this is a comment in C Sharp. The computer will not read this line. It won't do anything with it. This is solely for the person using the IDE. so they know what they're doing, or so somebody coming behind will know what they've done while they're coding. For our first program, we need to know a couple of things. We need to know what a variable is. We need to know how to output that variable. And finally, we need to know what the point of our program is. So we need to know exactly what we're doing when we're trying to code. So remember I said these are all comments. The computer won't go through this, but this is just so we have categories where we're learning about different things and we can easily tell what we're doing. For our first program, we're going to make something that stores the information about a rectangle, and then it's going to calculate the area and the perimeter of a rectangle. It's not very complicated. It's something that we can do in our head, but it is a really nice first stepping stone for our very first program in this series. So the first thing we need to know is what's a variable. On a basic level, a variable is simply a place where we just store a piece of information. In this case, we're making a math program. So we need a place to store a simple number, an integer. Now, an integer won't store anything but a whole number, so that's important. We know we can't give it a point value, a decimal place, but it will store exactly what we need for something simple like the side of a rectangle. So in C#, we call them ints, and we're going to call this height. So we have the height of our rectangle, and we need to assign a value to that. So let's say our height is 13 inches. So here we have an integer that is a height of 13 inches. Now the computer, since this is not a comment, will know that, and this is a variable that we can use later and reference. It's worth noting that I followed the standard naming convention for making this variable, and that is to have the first letter of the first word as lowercase. Some people call it humpback naming, but it's the standard convention. Just the first letter needs to be lowercase when it's a variable. So we need to create another one. So we need to have a height and we need to have a width, because those are the two elements that make up a rectangle. So if we assign our width a value of 8, we have all the variables that we actually need to have to make this rectangle. This is called instantiating the variable. We're giving it a value. We have a height of 13 and we have a width of 8 inches. We will see in a second that that's not strictly necessary. We're about to instantiate some more variables but not give them values. And I say that because we need to have a place where we store our area and our perimeter for our rectangle. So we're going to create something called an area. And we can do this if we're not assigning values. And we can also instantiate a perimeter. And the computer knows that there are two variables here that we have not filled out yet. Now we can do this on one line, or we can do this on two. It doesn't really matter. It's just a preference. But the important thing here is that we have an area and perimeter to fill out. And we can fill that out in different ways. We can do it above, or the more common way in programming is we're going to find out a way to fill in that variable with calculations. In this case, we can probably guess what the area and perimeter are, but if we're doing a more complicated program, we're not always going to know. Maybe it's the output of 12 different math problems all coming down into one answer. So we'll always hard code this. So we can set our area equal to something. And in this case, we have two really great things to set it equal to. We can just simply take our height and then multiply it by the width, and we have our area. It's going to do the math for us, which is really great, because like I said, not always will it be something so simple. Sometimes it'll be 10 equations that go down into one answer. So I challenge you here to pause the video and think about what you would type to find the perimeter. And just know that all of the standard math signs work the same way. Just like how I used this times here, we can take that out and we can use a plus, or we can use a minus. As long as we're referencing a variable or a number, we can make it whatever we want. So I challenge you to pause the video and see if you can't figure out what the next line will be. Now I hope you've had some success after pausing it, but we're going to go through it here. We take our perimeter and we're going to set that equal to the height plus the height plus the width plus the width. That's one way to do it. There's also other ways to do it, but that just comes down to math. We can set the perimeter equal to, and we're going to use parentheses here just like we would in math. We can do the height times 2 plus the width times 2. And that's the same thing, but it's just an illustrated example of we're able to use parentheses here just like we would in the standard order of operations in math. So we have these things here. We have this information in them. How do we get it out of the computer? We don't really strictly need to for this example because we can just think, oh, well, I know what this 13 times 8 is, but we want the computer to be able to tell us. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a line of code that makes the computer print out what it is. And that's pretty easy. So in C#, we have this thing called a console, and that's our command prompt window. So if you go down into your system processor and you open up your command prompt, our console, this is the Windows console. Visual Studios will have its own console, but in C# we can tell that to do things. So we do that by writing out console, and then we're going to tell it what to do. And it has a bunch of different things that it's allowed to do. But one of them is called writeLine. And what that does is it writes a line. So I can say, hi, my name is Terry. And it's going to write that line out. We can even use proper capitalization. I use these quotes to signify that it's just putting out everything in between these quotes. That's called a string, but we'll get to that in a later video. In this case, what we really want is our console to tell us what the area is. And we can make this a little prettier by giving it a little bit of text to tell us what we're doing. So the area is, and then we get to the really cool bit of this. We can do our console.writeLine, and we can put in just area. We don't have to put in any quotes or anything like that, and it's just going to, on a new line, put area, and that's great. If I hit Control F5 on this, it's going to run this program, and as you can see here, it says, hi, my name is Terry, the area is 104. That's pretty cool. We've just put out our first bit of text in a program. But I'll open that up one more time so we can notice something. You see how the 104 is down on the next line? It's not really a big deal, but it is sort of improper. What if we just took out a line here and just had console.write? Let's see what happens. Well, hey, look at that. It doesn't go down to the next line. We wrote the area is, and then it wrote area. And that's because when you have console.writeLine, it writes what it says and then it goes down to the next line. Console.write just makes it write whatever it says following that. So again, I'm going to do one of those things where I challenge you to pause the video and try to figure out what we might do next. In this case, we're going to try to output what the perimeter is. So go ahead and pause. Hopefully that was a productive pause, and you'll have something like what I'm about to write. So we write down console.writeLine, and we have our quotes, and say the perimeter is. We end our lines always in C# with a semicolon. And we do our console.write. Oh, this one needs to be a right line. And here we're just going to put perimeter. And it's just going to output the perimeter. But remember up above where we have the area is, we just did a console.write. We need to do that same thing with the perimeter is. So when we run this program, again, Control F5, if you don't remember, it says the area is 104 and the perimeter is 42. Now, I think that's pretty cool because you may not have noticed, but in that whole time, we just took two variables, two numbers, and we made our very first program. And there we have it, our very own math program. This will lead us nicely into the next video where we start working with things like inputs and strings. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching this video all the way to the end. On behalf of KeySmash Studios, thank you, and be sure to subscribe, like, and share our video.